Hi there. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Fassina, and I'm the president of Athabasca University. And today, I want to talk a little bit about how our imagined plan of transforming lives and transforming communities goes so far beyond to be able to bridge the social, cultural, and economic divides currently facing society. So whether you're a team member inside the AU environment or a member of the public that's considering looking at this university, I'm hoping that this video enables you to see how we see our university today and well into the future fitting into the broader societal context and how we truly will become the university of the future. The first thing that I'm going to do is an Indigenous land recognition. We make these land acknowledgements as a formal statement that recognizes the unique and enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. It is also a tradition that dates back many generations. It allows us to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional keepers and ongoing custodians of this land. So Tansi, Ki na nas kum tinawau. Athabasca University respectfully acknowledges that we are on and work on the traditional lands of the Indigenous peoples, Inuit, First Nation, and Métis of Canada. We honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of the Indigenous peoples and give thanks to them. We're facing an incredibly difficult time in society. Divisive and fear-based rhetoric fueled by populist and ideological politics dominates numerous forms of media, geopolitical relations, and community discussions. Unfortunately, individuals find it easier to tear down and criticize, often anonymously, than to constructively debate, seek and speak truth, and create knowledge. Both underpinning and fueled by this divisiveness is the growing social, economic, and cultural divide between individuals and communities. In response, societies at large are calling upon higher education to actively contribute to the slowing and indeed the reversal of the ever-increasing cultural, social, and economic divides among and between individuals and the communities in which they live. The paradox in all of this is that the exponential speed at which information is created, adapted and combined, shared and accessed is unprecedented, often leading to many of the divides that society is calling on higher education to resolve. A world in which knowledge and innovation are inequitably distributed is one in which the divides among and between individuals, communities, and nations will amplify to a point where they become unbridgeable. Even nations considered to be developed and stable are staring down the barrel of unparalleled disruption. The impact of the knowledge renaissance on higher education cannot be overstated. With knowledge now sitting at the center of a career toolbox, learners, governments, and industry alike are putting pressure on the higher education sector to adapt at the speed of innovation and to provide more complex learning opportunities to more learners in a shorter time. To respond, higher education needs to rethink its responsibility to society and how it comes to deliver on that responsibility. For instance, societal forces have eroded much of the knowledge creation and curation perspective of traditional universities. The commoditization of information and ease of access has placed information literally at individuals' fingertips through cellular technology. With the help of modern and personalized search algorithms, the individual can now serve as curator of their own learning outcomes. Beyond the potential for individualized and personalized knowledge curation, the nature of information creation has changed in the eyes of our learners as well. Namely, learners have moved from passive recipient through critical consumer to now active contributor of information. Despite the erosion of these two tenets of a modern university, the higher education system remains steadfastly committed to a remaining core value proposition, and that is the issuance of credentials. Even this, however, is under threat as corporations are lessening their focus on specific credentials or the need for a credential at all. Our modern context is not the first time the social construct of a university has faced significant change. With each adaptation, universities have inherently sought to meet the needs of the society that they currently serve. The difference in the knowledge renaissance is that the needs of society are shifting faster than ever before. Universities need to ask what we can do better and more effectively than anyone else. And pulling on the root of the humanism within society that propagated initially in the 18th century, a renewed lens towards relevance may be to consider universities more as a social enterprise that enables individuals to create and curate knowledge so that they may improve the social, economic, cultural, and environmental quality of life in their communities. In an effort to respond to the changing needs of society, Athabasca University came together to create the Imagine Plan. It was an opportunity for the university to truly think about what the university of the future would be. As we thought about what makes AU uniquely special, we ended up landing on 4 primary themes. The first of these themes is Beyond Open, bridging open and inclusion. We have always been an open university and will continue to be one well into our second 50 years. To reach beyond open and set the stage for the next evolution of open universities globally, we chose to focus on the concept of inclusion. So what does this mean? It means an environment in which every individual is welcome to learn. We want to get to the point where we never need to say no. It allows us to be truly learner-centric. Let us start with the premise that every human being is capable of learning at some level. This is echoed in the UN's Envision 2030 goal number 4 that seeks to create equitable and affordable access to quality education throughout someone's life. Specific to the higher education sector, this UN sustainability goal states that every person should have equal and affordable access to quality technical, vocational, and tertiary education, and this includes university education. Despite a global recognition of the importance of university education, modern universities discriminate between individuals and select who should be given the opportunity to learn. These criteria are often put in place to increase the probability that a learner will complete the credential for which they've applied. The risk to society, however, is not inherently based on the concept of selecting learners who have the readiness, ability, and capacity to learn. Rather, it's in the criteria by which universities discriminate between these potential learners. Well-meaning, yet arguably misplaced proxies for a learner's readiness, ability, and capacity to learn are abound. Consider merit, often based on the successful completion of secondary school, location of residency, financial ability, or demographic characteristics such as gender, age, ethnicity, religion, and culture. The unintended consequence of using these proxies is that they create systemic barriers between individuals and knowledge, completely unrelated to their readiness, their ability, and their capacity, thereby reinforcing the very lines of inequality within communities and society that education is being asked to reduce. By doing so, the social and cultural divide is amplified by universities through their selection processes. To be truly learner-centric, universities cannot intentionally or unintentionally prevent individuals and communities from reaching their highest potential through knowledge. This is the principle of universal equal access. The principle that all individuals who have the readiness, ability, and capacity to learn should be given equal opportunity to do so, regardless of their background. The second theme we landed on was moving beyond the norm. What this means to us is the willingness to embrace the innovation that made us Athabasca University in the first place. Take, for instance, the question of what do people learn? Looking back over the history of the modern university, one can see the emergence of a humanist perspective stemming from one of a focus on divinity during the 17th and 18th century. While professional environments emerged at the same time, like medicine, the humanist perspective dominated and later developed into the modern study of the humanities. Authors have sometimes referred to this as the learning to be. As time progressed through the 20th century, society witnessed a dramatic shift in the gold standard of what people needed to learn. Learning to be shifted toward learning to do. Set against the backdrop of the Industrial Revolution, vocational skills emerged as the gold standard in university learning. The creation of discipline-specific faculties and degree offerings, such as engineering, law, and business, and the emergence of polytechnic institutions focused on technical apprenticeships like welding, electrical, and construction. The knowledge renaissance has forced us to rethink the gold standard of learning yet again. To begin, technology is innovating so quickly that technical skills are often obsolete before the student has even completed their program. At the same time, the increased complexity of challenges brought on by the exponential technology gains has increased the demand for humanistic skills. In a knowledge-based economy, however, neither of these can be ignored. To this end, universities are being asked to combine learning to do with learning to be. That is, universities are asked to create Renaissance grads, whom have exceptional and up-to-date technical skills, and a full complement of soft skills, often affiliated with the humanities, such as critical thinking, communication, leadership, and social intelligence. Without violating many of our fundamental assumptions about higher education, our modern conceptualization of universities will find difficulty in creating an environment conducive to this Renaissance graduate. To begin, universities need to dismiss the premise that learners approach universities from a homogeneous, albeit relatively, starting point with respect to learning capacity, capability, and readiness. While this assumption is more accurately supported in highly competitive university entry environments, it's far less likely to be supported in an environment like ours that enables universal equal access. Adding further complexity to the heterogeneous nature of the modern learner is that rapid, easy, and free access to liberated information has enabled learners to self-initiate and self-curate their learning journey. Thus, the baseline knowledge of a first-time university learner is likely to be increasingly heterogeneous. To this end, universities need to figure out how to rapidly and on scale assess where an individual is in their personal learning journey. That is, what is their current knowledge, as well as the learner's capacity, capability, and readiness to learn at a university level. Complementing the idea that not all learners start from the same place, we must also dismiss the premise that all learners are seeking a similar outcome. We need to recognize that an individual's learning goals might be as unique as they are. Knowing that not all learners will have a clear and refined sense of their desired outcomes, let alone their desired learning goals, we need to be able to quickly and on scale enable learners to continuously define and adapt their individual personal learning goals. Having assisted the learner in assessing their unique starting point and unique end point, we must then be able to assist them in creating a self-curated and personalized learning journey so that they may be able to bridge the gap from where they are to where they would like to be. Adding to the concept of embracing innovation, we also have critically asked why people learn. While the question of complementing technical and non-technical learning outcomes in an individual's learning journey is important, the question does not represent the full gambit of reasonings behind why individuals may choose to initiate and curate their personal learning journey. To begin, we need to recognize that the discrete outcome of a credential is not necessarily a shared outcome among learners. Whether this discrete set of learning outcomes is important to a learner and represents an end into and of itself rests singularly with the learner, not the university. To suggest that a credential is an end into and of itself is to suggest that learning can be completed in large episodes, typically a 4-year period, and that individuals can achieve the necessary learning in this single episode to meet their needs throughout the rest of their life. That is, after 4 years of intensive learning, someone is prepared with the tools they will need to positively contribute to themselves and their communities throughout their entire life. Given the pace of change in the digital economy, this is simply not true. As a result, AU wants to create relationships with our learners throughout their life, based on the premise that personalized learning pathways need to be as unique as the individual curating them and personalized to meet the individual needs on scale. A university must also demonstrate an ability to create a recognition system that can accommodate individualized needs throughout their entire life. Thus, the concept of enabling learners to do, to be, and to become must be a lifetime partnership between the learner and the university. Only then the university can enable the learner to learn and to connect. A third theme we identified is the need to move beyond place. Namely, how do we create a lifelong relationship with our learners without ever having a campus for them to visit? The premise that individuals can learn throughout life inherently recognizes that individuals will learn both within a university-supported learning pathway and beyond the reach of a university-supported pathway. If not, then the only place that learning occurs would be through a university, a simply untenable statement. If we return to the premise of a self-curated, personalized learning journey, the concept of lifelong learning had two significant implications for a university. First, a university needs to rapidly recognize and sanction on scale both formal, or the university, and informal, or non-university learning. Second, universities need to remove the artificial separation between learning and life. Returning to the assumption that a credential is a distinct learning goal, universities have sought to equate university-sanctioned learning, for example, credit and non-credit courses as part of a credential, with non-university learning. The most recent formulations of this attempt are seen in prior learning assessments, curriculum mapping, transferability agreements, and the like. Inherent in this approach is an attempt to equate someone's prior knowledge, or learning, with the knowledge or learning that they would garner by completing a course at the university in question. Most of these equating processes, however, work on a level of analysis that is only tangentially related to the learning itself, and that is the course. The logic follows that providing recognition toward a degree for a learner's pre-existing knowledge that was acquired outside the university and potentially self-curated and personalized can only be provided if that knowledge is deemed by a third party to be equivalent to the knowledge that may potentially have been acquired by the learner had the learner actually enrolled and successfully completed a university course. Given that credit is not often given for parts of a course, but rather the entire course, the logic extends further that pre-existing knowledge or learning outcomes must exist in neatly packaged units that are of equal size, like 1, 3, 6 credits, and of equal makeup, for example, similar groupings of learning outcomes, to that of a university course. As a result, universities are aware that people learn in other environments, but in order to formally acknowledge that learning, it must be first equated to something easy for the university to count. Adding to the complexity of prior learning recognition is the tendency for universities to require this concept of a residency. The concept being that in order to be granted a credential by an institution, the learner must have acquired a certain percentage of their knowledge, often 50% or greater, at the institution granting the degree. Combining the perspective of residency and prior learning assessment, the logic would follow that lifelong learners may seek credit for pre-existing knowledge, provided that pre-existing knowledge does not exceed 50% of the potential knowledge garnered through a degree. Utilizing an alternative analogy, this would be similar to a customer looking to purchase the 4th novel in a series, having already read the first 3, and being informed by the bookstore that they must also purchase book 3 in a series and read it again before the bookstore will provide them with book 4. The inherent challenge with this perspective is that sanctioned and non-sanctioned learning may not equate. Moreover, by asking the learner to equate non-sanctioned learning to sanctioned learning is asking them to adapt to the university as compared to the university adapting to the learner. Moreover, seeking to equate sanctioned and non-sanctioned learning is to suggest that a learner is simply the sum of their university learning, which we know inherently not to be true. An individual is the sum of many parts, including their learning. Beyond the inherent risk associated with trying to equate non-sanctioned learning to sanctioned learning is that robust prior learning assessments are inherently resource intensive and tend not to be done on scale. So shifting our lens back to the learner, universities need to ask, what is the learning goal? Where is the learner's knowledge today? How can we best assist the learner in bridging the delta? And how can sanctioned university learning complement to non-sanctioned learning to help bridge that delta? To put the learner in the middle, we need to be able to assess whether sanctioned learning and non-sanctioned learning has met the learning outcomes of that individual quickly and on scale. Taking the learning journey one step further, one will be hard-pressed to identify a learning outcome that specifies the context of a classroom. Instead, learning goals tend to be embedded in a community context or a personal context. The place-based classroom environment, therefore, creates an artificial distinction between learning and the individualized context of the learner. And universities need to be able to break down this artificial barrier. While we see this underway through initiatives such as work-integrated learning, or WIL, and changes in the didactic approaches to learning methods, one may suggest that institutions of higher learning have not gone far enough. Rather, universities need to take the step to the natural endpoint of WIL and talk about context or community integrated learning, CIL. The premise here is that the context in which a learner finds themselves makes them a better learner and ultimately improves the learning environment. To be truly learner-focused, however, universities need to take the learning to the learner, not the opposite. For learning to be truly lifelong, it needs to be available when the learner needs it, in essence on demand, and be presented in manageable chunks that they can process in their time. If learning is presented in manageable chunks and on demand, then we must also violate the perceived linear nature of learning. Rather than concepts building upon each other in sequence, learning opportunities must be relatable and connectable, more like a nomenological network than a learning pathway. To truly meet the individualized and personalized nature of learning, the learning environment must learn from itself in relation to the individual learner. Thus, not only should a learner be able to request learning on demand, but the learning environment must also be able to recommend connected learning to support that learner in reaching their own personalized learning goals. The final theme we identified was the concept of moving beyond the now. This theme recognizes that we're a relatively small team and we get to behave that way. Take for example that we are the second largest university in Alberta by student headcount, and we're the largest undergraduate university in Alberta by student headcount. Yet we're still a relatively small team. What this means is that we get to act, behave, and process differently than any other university. We get to look to streamline and embrace the simplicity in our internal processes to make it so we're able to do things in a student-centric way, in ways that make our lives easier as well. And to do this, what we end up getting to do is focusing on continuous improvement. We're looking to try to adapt, make better, make stronger every possibility that we do when it comes to our research as well as our teaching environment. So I'm hoping that this has brought a little bit of clarity around how I see the Imagine Plan fitting into the broader context of the world of higher education and where we fit. I'm hoping it's given you a chance to reflect on where you might fit in with the Imagine Plan and how your specific role helps mobilize the beyond the open, beyond place, beyond the norm, and beyond the now. Because that is what we're able to do. It is able to create the opportunity to create that university of the future. And we're all part of this team, and it's going to take every last one of us to make that reality happen for our learners and for society.